1 million years ago, Earth looked familiar on the surface, but it was locked in the grip of a colder, harsher world. Global temperatures were, on average, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius lower than today. Vast ice sheets blanketed the poles and stretched far beyond the Arctic and Antarctic circles. This massive glaciation trapped enormous volumes of water, lowering sea levels by more than 100 meters. The result was a striking transformation of geography. Where oceans now separate continents, land bridges once connected them. Asia and North America were joined by the Bering Land Bridge, allowing humans and animals to cross into the Americas. Britain was not an island, but an extension of continental Europe. Japan was connected to the Korean peninsula. The shapes of continents remained, but coastlines were very different. Much of Northern Europe and North America was buried under thick layers of ice. Regions that are now temperate forests or farmland were instead dominated by tundra, steppe, and permafrost. The Baltic Sea and the Great Lakes did not yet exist. Instead, glacial lakes formed in other areas and later vanished with the retreat of the ice. Vegetation adapted to the cold. Coniferous forests dominated, with hardy species like spruce and fir prevailing. Deciduous trees like oaks and beeches existed but were limited. The landscape was open and windswept, with dust storms frequently sweeping across exposed plains. The animal kingdom was ruled by what scientists call the mammoth fauna, large cold-adapted species that thrived in the Ice Age. Woolly mammoths roamed alongside woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer, and herds of steppe bison. Apex predators like cave lions, saber-toothed cats, and giant bears stalked the frozen forests and plains. This was the world before modern humans, a frozen Earth shaped by climate and evolution, waiting for a new kind of intelligence to emerge. R2, the first tools. Around 2 million years ago, a new kind of hominin emerged on the African continent, Homo habilis, the handyman. Though primitive by modern standards, this species marked a critical turning point in human evolution. Homo habilis was the first known hominin to deliberately craft and use tools. Their stone flakes and chopping implements were simple, crudely chipped from river cobbles, but represented a major leap forward in behavior. These tools allowed them to process meat, break bones for marrow, and perhaps dig for tubers and roots. For the first time, hominins began reshaping their environment, not just reacting to it. They stood upright, walked on two legs, and had hands capable of precise gripping, but it was their brain that began to set them apart. With a cranial capacity of roughly 500 to 700 cubic centimeters, Homo habilis had a larger and more complex brain than their Australopithecine ancestors. Of particular interest is evidence suggesting early neurological structures associated with speech. While Homo habilis likely lacked true language, their brain anatomy hints at rudimentary vocal communication, an early precursor to spoken language. Grunts, calls, and gestures may have enabled cooperation during hunting or food sharing. Their diet was mixed. Scavenged meat gathered fruits, nuts, and plant matter. They likely lived in small, mobile bands, moving through open savannas and woodland margins, tracking herds, avoiding predators, and learning to survive in a world of danger and competition. Homo habilis did not dominate the planet, but their innovation, the intentional shaping of tools, ignited a cultural trajectory that would redefine what it meant to be human. In chipped stone, we find the first fingerprints of intellect, and from those first flakes, a legacy began, one that would stretch across continents, millennia, and species. Part 3. The Upright Pioneers. Homo erectus marked a decisive leap in human evolution. Appearing over 1.8 million years ago in Africa, this species was the first hominin to leave its birthplace and spread across continents. Fossils attributed to Homo erectus have been found in Java, China, and parts of Europe, an unprecedented geographic range for early humans. They walked fully upright and had body proportions remarkably similar to modern humans. Their limbs were long and well suited for endurance walking, possibly even running. Their brains were larger, averaging around 900 cubic centimeters, and their tool use more advanced. The stone hand axes and cleavers of the Acheulean tradition reflect both skill and planning. But their most transformative achievement was the control of fire. Evidence from burned bones and hearths suggests that Homo erectus not only used fire, but likely maintained it. Fire provided warmth, protection, light, and the ability to cook food, an evolutionary game changer that expanded dietary options and may have improved brain nutrition. Homo erectus also began constructing shelters, indicating an ability to manipulate their environment for long-term habitation. Though rudimentary, these structures reveal planning and a growing social complexity. Across their vast range, regional variants evolved. In Asia, Pithecanthropus was once considered a separate species, now recognized as a local Homo erectus population. On the island of Flores, another lineage, Homo floresiensis, evolved in isolation, shrinking dramatically in size. These island populations, while fascinating, did not survive the long arc of human history. Some groups of Homo erectus became evolutionary dead ends. Others paved the way forward. As pioneers of migration, tool-making, and fire mastery, Homo erectus established the foundations for what it means to be human. They were not us, but they set the stage for everything that followed. Part 4: The Neanderthal Age. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, occupied Europe and parts of Western Asia for over 500,000 years, from approximately 600,000 to 40,000 years ago. During that span, they adapted with remarkable efficiency to some of the harshest climates the planet has ever seen. Their physical build was robust. Thick bones, wide pelvises, and powerful muscle attachments gave them immense strength. Their large nasal cavities helped warm frigid air, and their stocky proportions minimized heat loss. These traits were not incidental. They were sculpted by survival in the Ice Age. Neanderthals hunted large game with close-range weapons, coordinated in small groups, and used fire regularly. They built shelters, maintained hearths, and fashioned clothing from animal hides. Their tools, known as Mousterian technology, were more advanced than earlier hominin forms, but lacked the refinement later seen in Homo sapiens toolkits. Socially, they demonstrated care for the injured and elderly. Archaeological sites have uncovered healed fractures and individuals with debilitating conditions who lived years past injury, clear signs of communal support. They buried their dead, sometimes with food or flowers, suggesting early symbolic or ritual behavior. But Neanderthals were not without limits. Their tools remained relatively unchanged for tens of thousands of years. Their population densities were low, their social networks small, and while they may have produced personal ornaments or simple instruments, large-scale art or complex cultural expression remains absent or disputed. Cognitive capacity was not the issue. Their brain volume equaled or exceeded ours, but the way they used that capacity differed. They survived, endured, and adapted, but did not innovate at the scale Homo sapiens would soon unleash. Neanderthals were not primitive brutes. They were intelligent, resilient humans, uniquely shaped by their world. Yet despite their strength and experience, they would not be the ones to inherit the future. Their age would end not with a crash, but with a quiet disappearance, leaving behind only bones, tools, and a trace of themselves in our DNA. Part 5: Sapiens. Rise. Homo sapiens, our own species, emerged in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago. These early modern humans, often referred to as Cro-Magnon in the European archaeological record, were biologically and behaviorally distinct from their predecessors. They were anatomically modern, upright posture, slender limbs, and large skulls housing brains of roughly 1,350 cubic centimeters. But anatomy was only part of the revolution. Around 125,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began to leave Africa, first through the Middle East, then radiating into Asia, Europe, and eventually Australia and the Americas. They were not just survivors, they were migrators, navigators, and adapters, capable of enduring and thriving in environments ranging from frozen tundra to tropical rainforest. What set them apart was not brute strength or toughness, it was culture. Homo sapiens organized themselves into larger, more cooperative groups. They developed more sophisticated tools, including bone needles, fishing gear, and projectile weapons. These weren't just functional, they were tailored, specialized, and efficient. They created art. From the caves of Lascaux to the handprints of Sulawesi, early sapiens left behind symbolic images, evidence of abstract thinking, memory, and meaning. They made jewelry, carved figurines, and began to decorate their dead. These were not just behaviors, they were expressions of a mind capable of metaphor, myth, and shared identity. They built rituals, they passed down knowledge, they told stories, and slowly, Homo sapiens outcompeted all other human species, not through violence alone, but through strategy, social cohesion, and innovation. Every human alive today descends from this one lineage. The rise of sapiens was not just a biological event, it was a cultural explosion. Part 6. The vanishing kin. Today, only one human species walks the earth, Homo sapiens, but it wasn't always this way. For hundreds of thousands of years, multiple human species coexisted. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in the East, Homo floresiensis on isolated islands, Homo naledi deep within South African caves, all members of the same genus, all upright, tool-using, intelligent beings. So why did they vanish? There is no single answer. Climate change played a major role. As environments shifted rapidly, some species were unable to adapt. Food sources dwindled, habitats shrank, populations fragmented. Disease may have spread as different groups came into contact. Some hominin species might have lacked immunity to new pathogens introduced by migrating Homo sapiens. Competition mattered. Homo sapiens were more socially flexible, more cooperative in large groups, more capable of innovation. They hunted with greater efficiency. They shared knowledge across wider networks. In a world of scarce resources, even small advantages could determine survival. But extinction wasn't always violent. In some regions, interbreeding occurred. Genetic evidence shows that modern humans carry fragments of DNA from now extinct relatives. Up to 2% of the genome of non-African humans comes from Neanderthals. Certain populations in Oceania and Southeast Asia carry Denisovan DNA. These genes influence everything from immune response to metabolism to skin adaptation. In this sense, our extinct cousins did not disappear entirely. Pieces of them remain within us, in every heartbeat, every breath, every strand of DNA. The rise of Homo sapiens was not just a triumph. It came at a cost. The quiet fading of entire human lineages. Their bones lie buried. Their languages are law, but their legacy survives. Not in stories, but in genes. A silent inheritance from the kin we outlived. Part 7. Rivals in the ice. For tens of thousands of years, two intelligent human species shared the same stage, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. This was not a war. There were no great battles, no decisive conquests. Instead, it was a slow, quiet struggle, a long replacement, not an outright extinction. Neanderthals had the strength, but Cro-Magnon, our early Homo sapiens ancestors, had the edge in strategy and adaptability. They organized in larger, more complex groups. They communicated across wider distances. They exchanged tools, resources, and information across networks that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Neanderthals, by contrast, lived in smaller, more isolated communities, vulnerable to disruption. Sapiens developed more advanced tools. The atlatl, or spear thrower, allowed them to hunt from a distance. Barbed harpoons and fishhooks expanded their access to aquatic food sources. They carved bone needles and tailored clothing, giving them an edge in harsh Ice Age climates. They didn't walk alone. Evidence suggests that Cro-Magnon groups may have been the first to domesticate dogs, not just for companionship, but as early partners in hunting and protection. This would have transformed their ability to track prey and guard campsites. Neanderthals, in contrast, had a narrower diet, focused largely on large game. This made them more vulnerable when food sources declined. They lacked flexible strategies for foraging, fishing, or storing food. Environmental instability made things worse. Cold snaps, volcanic eruptions, and fluctuating ecosystems put increasing pressure on already fragile Neanderthal populations. Disease, possibly introduced by incoming sapiens, may have dealt the final blow. This wasn't genocide, it was survival. Over time, as climates shifted and generations passed, Neanderthal territories shrank. One group disappeared, then another, until only one species remained. The rivalry ended not with violence, but with replacement, a quiet eclipse in the ice. And in the end, it was adaptability, not strength, that decided the future of humanity. Part 8. What if we never existed? What if Homo sapiens had never evolved? It's a question that exposes the weight of our existence. Without modern humans, the world might look very different, and in some ways, far more intact. The great megafauna, mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, could still roam the earth. No industrial development, no global extinctions triggered by overhunting or habitat destruction. Forests, grasslands, and oceans might be healthier, wilder and untouched by fossil fuel combustion or plastic waste. Would another species have risen in our place? Neanderthals are the most likely candidate. They had large brains, used tools, buried their dead, and may have possessed early forms of language and symbolic thought. If Homo sapiens had never left Africa or perished before reaching Europe, Neanderthals might have continued evolving, adapting, and expanding. But would they have created a more peaceful world? There's no guarantee. Intelligence is not inherently benevolent. Neanderthals hunted, competed, and altered landscapes too. Given time and pressure, they might have built societies, waged wars, and developed technologies of their own, or perhaps no hominin would have dominated. The world might have remained in a prolonged equilibrium, predators and prey balanced, ecosystems intact, without one species rising to planetary control. A hypothetical reveals a truth. Our intelligence reshaped the Earth. Dramatically, irreversibly. We became the apex predator, the engineer of ecosystems, the first species capable of altering the global climate. This is not a moral judgment, it's a fact of evolution. If we hadn't existed, the planet might have been greener, quieter, more stable. But we do exist. And that fact carries consequences and responsibilities. The question isn't just, what if we were never here? It's this. Now that we are, what will we do next? Part 9. The immortality question. Why do humans long for immortality? Across time and cultures, the idea of eternal life has captivated the human imagination. From ancient myths of gods and elixirs to religious visions of paradise to modern scientific quests for life extension, our species has been driven by the desire to defeat death. But what lies beneath that desire? It is not just fear of dying. It is the longing to preserve the self, the mind, the story, to continue shaping the world long after the body should have perished. Today, science is pushing the boundaries. Genetic editing, anti-aging therapies, mind-uploading concepts. Some speak openly of extending human life indefinitely. But this dream, if realized, carries consequences far beyond biology. Immortality raises serious ethical dilemmas. Who gets to live forever? Will it deepen inequality, favoring the wealthy and powerful? Could it lead to population crises, resource depletion, or political stagnation? From an evolutionary standpoint, mortality drives adaptation. Generations die so that new ones can rise, different, better suited to changing environments. If no one dies, the system freezes, innovation slows, risk disappears. There is also the psychological cost. Human meaning is often built upon impermanence, legacy, memory, urgency. Remove death, and we may lose the very things that make life feel vital. So the question is not, can we live forever? It is, should we? Rather than chasing eternal life, science may be better served focusing on quality of life, health, dignity, and well-being in the years we do have. Mortality is not a flaw to fix. It is a feature of what it means to be human. Immortality may never come, but meaning, real, grounded, finite meaning, is already here. Part 10. Time and Paradox. Time is not a simple line. It never was. For centuries, humans viewed time as absolute, a steady universal clock ticking away the seconds. Isaac Newton imagined time as a rigid backdrop, the same for all observers. But in the 20th century, Albert Einstein dismantled that view. Time, he showed, is not fixed. It bends with gravity, stretches with speed. The faster you move, the slower time passes. The deeper the gravity, the slower the clock. Time is not universal. It is relative. This opened the door to one of the most captivating and troubling ideas in science fiction: time travel. What if we could go back? The concept tempts us. Save a loved one, fix a mistake, kill Hitler. But here comes the paradox. If you travel back in time and change the past, what happens to the future you came from? Consider the classic grandfather paradox. If you prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, you were never born. But if you were never born, who went back to stop them? These loops create logical impossibilities. Causal chains collapse. Reality breaks. Modern physics offers no mechanism, no law of nature that allows backward time travel without paradox. Wormholes, quantum entanglement, parallel timelines, these remain speculative, and none resolve the fundamental contradictions of altering the past. The best model we have is this: time flows forward, entropy increases, moments pass irreversibly. We cannot rewind the tape. This matters, not just for physics, but for how we view history. If time only moves one way, then every decision, every life, every civilization matters once, and only once. There are no do-overs, no second drafts. To understand time as a one-way stream is to understand the urgency of now and the finality of the past. History cannot be changed. Part 11. A world without us. What if, one day, humans vanished? No warning, no apocalypse, just gone. Within hours, power grids would begin to fail. Subways would flood. Nuclear power plants without constant maintenance could melt down or explode. Cities, once monuments to human achievement, would begin their slow collapse. In days, wild animals would reclaim quiet neighborhoods. Deer in Paris, bears in Berlin, wolves crossing deserted highways. The world would not mourn our absence, it would adapt. Within years, roads would crack under growing roots. Skyscrapers would rot from within. Without climate control, mold, insects, and weather would break down glass, steel, and concrete. Dams would burst. Coastal cities would sink beneath rising seas. After a century, few structures would remain intact. In 500 years, most buildings would be ruins. Forests would spread. Grasslands would stretch into former suburbs. Elephants might roam Asia. Bison might thunder across the American plains. Species we pushed to the brink, rhinos, whales, tigers, could flourish again. In 10,000 years, Earth would be nearly unrecognizable. No trace of politics, no memory of nations, no museums, no literature, no language. Just one unmistakable relic: plastic. Bottles, bags, microbeads, engineered not to break down. Even after millennia, fragments would remain in sediments, in oceans, in the fossil record. Our legacy, not art, not ideas, but polymers. And what does this thought experiment reveal? That we are not the center of the planet. The Earth existed before us. It can recover without us. We are not masters of nature, but temporary residents in a vast, complex ecosystem. The question is not whether Earth can survive without humans. It can. The real question is, can we live in a way that allows Earth to thrive with us still here? That future depends not on our power, but on our humility. On the recognition that every species, no matter how intelligent, is only ever borrowing time. Part 12. Restarting civilization. If civilization collapsed tomorrow, how would we rebuild it? Not just surviving, but restarting. Agriculture, energy, medicine, language, law, industry, everything from scratch. The first question is population. Research suggests a minimum of several hundred individuals, diverse in skills and genetics, to avoid inbreeding and to sustain long-term recovery. More than just numbers, we'd need the right people: scientists, engineers, farmers, educators, builders. But knowledge is fragile. Without printed books or digital archives, most of what defines the modern world, electricity, metallurgy, antibiotics, infrastructure, could vanish in a generation. Restarting a power grid or chemical production plant isn't just about tools. It's about understanding. And that understanding lives in specialized minds. So who preserves that knowledge? We'd need guardians of memory, people trained not just to do, but to teach. A kind of knowledge arc, portable, durable, multilingual guides to essential processes. How to purify water, how to grow crops, how to smelt metal, how to create penicillin. Restarting would require sequences: agriculture before medicine, tools before electricity, community before currency. There would be no shortcuts, only hard-earned progress, step by deliberate step. And then comes the greatest challenge: governance. How do we avoid repeating the mistakes of the past? Greed, war, ecological destruction. To restart civilization is not just to restore technology, but to redesign values. A hopeful scenario exists. If the survivors remember not only what we lost, but why. If they rebuild with humility, prioritize cooperation, balance innovation with sustainability, then humanity could rise again, stronger, wiser. This second chance would demand more than cleverness. It would demand a cultural evolution where growth is not measured by expansion, but by resilience and harmony with the natural world. Because the next civilization may not have a third chance. The end is not inevitable, but rebirth is not guaranteed either. Only a species that learns from both its triumphs and its catastrophes can ever hope to build again, better, and this time with care.